There we go. Hi everyone, are you there? Oh, you are there. There you are. Sorry, it was a bit slow putting your faces on. We were sat here wondering, there's three people there, but we can't see them. Press the start meeting button. That would be helpful, wouldn't it?
I was like, it's a new yellow button. I don't really know what it does, but it says that.
Mine's when mine loads up, it's all cameras already automatically off, and also my microphone. So yeah, and have to go through that process. How is everyone?
Doing these updates, this is it, and you're just like, oh, it's new buttons.
Yeah, we don't like change. Hi Kev, hi everybody.
Yeah.
How are we all doing?
Afternoon, everyone.
Hi everyone.
Hey guys.
Good.
Hey. Kev's been back in the building 2 minutes, and he's got a polo already.
I know. I was thinking that. I was thinking,
what's going on here?
No, you're wrong, Paul. I've had this polo since 2018. Only t-shirt I've ever had.
Yeah.
Still going strong.
Amazing. Right. So, have we got everybody, Cal? Do you think?
I think we've probably got a couple of people that are going to come. So maybe just give it 30 seconds, see if we get any stragglers on, and then we can always let them in as they jump in for other stuff.
No worries. I guess dead conscious. I know everybody on the call apart from Ben. Hi Ben and Helen. Work in the network support team. Does everybody else know each other? Maybe apart from Ben and Abby.
I think it's just me, isn't it? Do you want me to introduce myself?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so Ben Fraser, one of the tutors for Street Games, also work for Active Leeds for Leeds City Council as a Children and Persons Development Officer.
Amazing. Thanks, Ben. We might not have time to go around the room, but I guess what we've got here is a real mixture of people from across the organisation, different regions, different functions, which is amazing to see. And welcome to Abby. Abby's in her 3rd week, so she's still as the Northwest Network Support Lead. So she's still in there. I can't see your camera, Abby. I don't know whether that's just a slow thing or your camera's off, but that's fine. Yeah, there you are. Hi. So again, I'm not going to test Abby, but I think we're exposing you to lots of new people over the 3 weeks that you've been here. But brilliant that you could all join. So we'll crack on. We have got quite a lot to get through in the hour. So I guess just as a bit of context, this is the second of the first 3 insight dissemination sessions that we're doing. The first one was last week, which was the introduction to doorstep sport. I don't know whether there was, stick your hand up if you were on that one last week. Yes, I've heard a few of you. So this session and the following ones will take a similar format in terms of the way that we'll put together and the purpose behind them. So 1 hour sessions, I guess what we'll present to you is a bit of context and some of the key information related to this topic. So this one today is around women and girls. And I guess the purpose of all of these is very much around upskilling and supporting staff around a certain topic so that you can confidently talk about the topic in your line of work. So whether that's through a cluster meeting, a network meeting, a one-to-one conversation with an LTO or with a partner, or whether it's running some bite-sized learning stuff or in the support of bids. So it's very much about kind of upskilling you and supporting you to a certain level so that you're confident around that topic to have a conversation around it. So I guess what I will do, I'm going to share my screen. We'll break, there's kind of 2 or 3 like natural breaks where I'll do the first bit and then Kelly will do the second bit. So we'll break in between those, and then hopefully there'll be a little bit of a chance to have a bit of discussion around that. So bear with me while I share my screen. Brilliant. Can everybody see that? Fabulous. So, now to slideshow format. Leave you guys at the one. Okay, amazing. So we'll talk through that bit. I guess with all these sessions, irrespective of the topic, I guess there are a number of things when you're doing the cluster meetings or the discussions, whatever it is, I guess a number of things to think about before you do it. So like, who is your audience? Are the coaches, leaders, project coordinators, people that work in strategy? Like, how long have you got with the group? Have you got an hour and a half? Have you got 20 minutes? What sector is it? The sports sector? Is it the non-sports sector? How much prior understanding is the group or the individual likely to have? And then is there any like local context that you think you should be aware of? So in the context of women and girls, what's going on in your patch in terms of women and girls? Are there any strategies? Are there any big things happening? So kind of going in with that level of understanding of like who is it? Who is your audience and who is it that you're talking to? So I just want to do a little bit of a potted history around us girls and kind of where it began and where we've got to. So originally, us girls began as a funded programme through Sport England's Active Women themed funding round back in 2011. So it was one of 10 projects funded by Sport England, along with, I think it was like Breeze, British Cycling's Breeze programme, back to netball, and there were a few others, which was very much around increasing and sustaining young women's participation in sport and physical activity in disadvantaged communities across the UK. And we used the word disadvantaged back then. And it was a consortium of around 50 projects from up and down the country, so England, and about 10 national partners. So it was very much about, one, bringing investment into different parts of different places in the country, low-income communities, to actually get physical activity up and running for women and girls. Aside from that, it was very much about learning, like action learning and understanding as we do that, bringing the projects together to share, to learn, and to kind of adapt the programme over time. And I'll talk to you in a minute just a bit more about the journey in terms of how the programme has evolved more into an approach over time. But you'll see there, originally the strap line was fun fitness friends get together with the girls. So some people that have been with Street Games forever, you know, you'll recognise some of this, but for others, I imagine it'll be new in terms of the history of it. So I guess what hasn't changed is the need. So why the programme was set up in the first place. So I guess we know that poverty, low income has a massive impact on sports participation. We also know that girls are less active than boys. So when you put low income, and if you live in a low income community, you're less likely to be active. If you're a girl in that low income community, you're less likely to be active again. So we call that double jeopardy. So if you then layer on ethnicity, you're less likely to be active again. So if you look at some of the latest stats from the Active Life survey. So if you look at the two columns on the right hand side, if you're a girl living in a high family affluence, you're more likely to be active than a girl from family with low affluence. Irrespective of whether your kind of affluence levels, if you're a girl, you're less likely to be active than if you're a boy. And I think the interesting bit in there is if you then compare a boy from a family with high levels of affluence with a girl from a family with low levels of affluence, you've got a massive disparity in there in terms of participation levels. So that was why the programme was initiated in the beginning, but we know that the issue remains the same, the problem remains the same, kind of 15 years on. So what I would say is we'll share these slides afterwards, so there's no need to make lots of notes or anything. So I guess going back a step in terms of the journey, I think it's fair to say it's evolved over time. So initially it was a ring fence pot of money to deliver us girls. As I said, we learned a lot, and as that kind of programme evolved, a number of different brands were kind of designed to best meet the needs of the girls. So there were whole loads of sub-brand around Us Girls over that kind of 2, 3, 4 year period of the programme. The Us Girls Rocks was an example of the festival brand that was born out of Us Girls, but again, kept the strapline get together with the girls. And one of the things we were learning is that girls love to come together, but they haven't got loads of opportunities to come together and do sport and physical activity and loads of other stuff. So that's what was, and there was lots of mini Us Girls Rocks festivals held around the country. Us Girls Alive was a slightly different programme that was funded through the Department of Health, Social Care and Volunteer Fund, and that was the creation of kind of health and well-being clubs or health and well-being sessions, recognising that from the insight that sport was often off-putting to many of the girls. So this was more about, we used to describe it as a kind of an interactive magazine. So lots of activities that the girls would potentially be interested in. So there's things like fashion, hair, beauty, lifestyle, nutrition, and sport was in there as well, but sport wasn't the hook. So that investment was about creating those kind of clubs, those sessions where it was kind of sport by stealth rather than sport being kind of the key aim to get the girls there. And another part of that was around creating, supporting and developing the girls as what they were called Us Girls Motivators. So girls from within the sessions to kind of take a lead and be supported around volunteering and leadership with their peers. So that was a programme that came out of Us Girls. Kind of another thing that we did during that time was around, so the programme fell during the time of 2012 Olympics and Paralympics. So there's a number of things we did around Us Girls Champions, which was basically getting a number of sporting ambassadors kind of involved to raise awareness of the programme and to support the programme. Probably the highest profile was Nicola Adams back then. But again, we could kind of use the hook of the games to get the projects, get the girls, get kind of delivery, like similar like to, I guess we're doing with the inspiration campaign today, is to help the projects and the girls within the projects to connect with the Olympics. So we created the Us Girls Games as well, which was a challenge between all the projects to get the girls to try as many Olympic sports as they could, and they got points and there was a league table and there was loads of kind of fun around that. I guess then on the back of those girls programme, once the official funding finished, we had the Doorstep Sport Club programme that spanned 2013 to 2017. And I guess what we wanted to do within that was to embed the Us Girls approach and some of the Us Girls learning in development of Doorstep Sport Clubs, so that the projects that were involved were thinking about girls and thinking about how to design and deliver sessions based on all the learning that we had as part of their Doorstep Sport Club. So there were a number of Doorstep Sport Clubs that were female only and others that were catering for both, but actually we're using the principles that we'd learned over time. From all of that insight that we gathered over time, we created a series of how-to guides that we still use today, and some of you might be using those in your work already. And the 3-hour Engaging Women and Girls workshop that still sits on our training academy menu today, which has been refreshed over time to incorporate some of the new learning that's been coming through. So I guess what I would say that whilst Us Girls is not a funded programme in the same way that it was initially, it's more of a kind of an approach. I guess the brand is still there. It's still there to be used by organisations if they wish. And I think what would be amazing is if we could find over time, some investment that could go into, I guess, refreshing Us Girls and all the sub-brands and everything that comes within it. So I guess bringing us up to kind of current day, where are we now? So we have got a kind of a refreshed ambition and aims for our women and girls work, and I'll touch on that in a minute. We have got some local investment into activity delivery for women and girls specifically. So a good example of that at the minute would be the Met Police project in London, which specifically around women and girls. There's lots of works happening in Greater Manchester, particularly in Rochdale, and growing in Salford around women and girls. So there is local money going in to do more around this space. We've still got lots of expertise in the organisation around women and girls, people that have been around for a long time, people that have worked kind of on the ground. So we've still got a lot to offer the network in terms of expertise. We've got a whole load of research and insight, and we're going to talk through what the 1,000 Young Voices research and insight told us about what girls are thinking, feeling around and kind of doing in relation to sport and physical activity. There was a whole project in Wales back in 2023, a couple of years ago, around kind of peer researchers, so girls being trained up as peer researchers to talk to other girls and young women about what they're doing, what they're feeling, etc. You're probably aware the last couple of years we've done quite a lot around International Women's Day, so to keep creating noise around this as an issue and how we can help and how we can solve and how we can connect to other partners. And I mentioned we've still got the training workshop and we've still got the how-to guides to draw on. So just in terms of our ambition and aims, I guess our ambition remains the same. It's very much about supporting the network of community organisations from low-income areas that are committed to helping girls and young women engage and participate in sport in a safe, supportive, kind of equitable way. And that hasn't changed, so that those girls in those communities still reap the benefits that sport and physical activity brings. And I guess there's kind of three ways that we're looking to do that without having dedicated capacity within street games, but actually how we can all think about it in our roles. So I guess the first one is around us collectively having a better understanding of what the current offer is for young women and girls in our network and who's doing what, and how can we help them to increase more opportunities for girls and women to be active. It's thinking about how we can develop opportunities for the girls to be like participating for their whole life. So getting them in, engaging them in the first place, retaining them, and then supporting them to be active off their own back into adult life. And then I guess the third bit is around partnership working and advocacy. So working with partners like Women in Sport, thinking about when Mark and others are having conversations at policy level, like what have we got to add and what have we got to bring to that. So before I go on to kind of the insight bit, let me stop sharing my screen for a second so I can see you. So that was kind of the context bit. Hopefully that was helpful in terms of bringing you up to speed with the journey. The next bit is more around like what we know, what the insight is telling us about women and girls. Has anybody got any questions before we go on to that bit? No? Good. All right. Okay. So, as you know, we did in 2023, we did the 1,000 Young Voices research. Of that, just under half of the girls, just under half of the young people were girls. So 494 of the girls out of the 1,000 sample were girls and young women aged 11 to 24. So what we've done is taken the findings from that sample to see what out of that whole sample of 1,000, what was coming through from the girls, what were they saying, and how did that differ from what the boys were saying? So there are quite a lot of slides, but we're going to run through them fairly quickly just to give you some of the kind of the headline stats around what came out of that piece of research. So I guess the first chunk is around like how important sport and physical activity is to the girls and how they feel towards being active. So the first thing that came out quite strongly was around their enjoyment, their relationship in terms of how they enjoy it. So as you can see on the screen, fewer girls said they enjoy playing sport and physical activity compared to the boys, and fewer girls enjoy watching it. So they don't like doing it as much and they don't like watching it as much. So the second question we asked them was around what do they do in their spare time? And you can see on the screen that the girls' responses, sport didn't come out as something that they frequently do in their spare time. So I think that really highlights like how sport is, certainly in this case, really prioritised for many women and girls, whereas sport came out quite strongly in terms of the boys. And I guess the next question further emphasises that in terms of how important they feel sport and physical activity is to their lives on a scale of 1 to 10. So the ones that said it is extremely important, so where they rated at 9 or 10, again, 32% of boys felt it was extremely important compared to only 14% of girls. And similarly, if you look at those that said 8, 9 or 10, there's more boys feel that sport and physical activity is important to them. So I think in terms of enjoyment, in terms of, you know, their feeling how important it is, girls generally felt that it wasn't that important compared to other things, and they did it less compared to other things in their life. So the girls were also asked to describe themselves in terms of one of these 3 categories, and you can see that around a third, so around 50% of them said they weren't sporty at all, or they were not very sporty, compared to only 23% that said they were very sporty. And if you compare that to the boys, 38% considered themselves to be very sporty, and only 35% said they were either not very sporty at all or not sporty. So again, there's a real difference between what the boys said and what the girls said in terms of how they describe themselves. I guess what is encouraging, though, is 2/3 of the girls said that they do enjoy it and they would like to participate more. So there is a kind of a latent demand there, a feeling of actually, whilst it might not be important to me, like, and I might not do much, I would like to do more. So I guess what we're trying to understand on the back of that is what would make you do more? What are the barriers for you not doing it at the minute? And what types of things would like encourage you to be more active in the future? The girls were asked about their confidence levels in terms of how confident they feel when taking sport and physical activity. 60% of the girls said that they feel confident compared to 76% of boys. So again, lower for girls than for boys. And we'll talk about confidence in a little bit more detail in a minute when we go into kind of a bit more deeper about what some of the narrative that came out of the study and from other studies as well in terms of their stage of life and confidence levels. The next things the girls were asked were around like how they felt, so to describe the emotions that they feel when they've taken taken part in sport and physical activity. So the words that the girls used the most were things like energetic, I feel happy, I feel joyful, it makes me feel relaxed, I feel uplifted, and I feel de-stressed, which are all, you know, quite positive emotions. However, there were some girls, and this was generally more than boys, who said they felt either worried, it made them feel worried and anxious, they felt judged, they were really self-conscious, they didn't feel good enough, and they felt a bit out of place, they felt like they didn't really belong. And those more negative emotions in general came out stronger for the girls than for the boys. So kind of moving on to the kind of the barriers bit. So what is it that's stopping girls from taking part? And again, I mentioned confidence, not being confident came out as top of that question, along with things like affordability, so not being able to afford it, not having the time. We'll have all seen all of this before. Feeling too anxious, being too self-conscious, not feeling like they are a sporty person. And periods, PMT, puberty came out quite a bit. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of how the work that's been doing in the sector around female puberty and impact on sport and physical activity, and how important at this stage of life, when we're talking around teenage girls, what a real influence that has in terms of how they feel, how they behave, what they do and what they think. So I guess this slide is taken from some previous research that has been done. So came out of the peer research that was done in Wales in 2023, and it's a bit of a culmination of other street games research and research from other partners. And I guess what that also identifies that maybe the 1,000 Young Voices didn't, that there are other barriers to participation as well. So access, confidence and insecurities came out, but as well as in 1,000 Young Voices, but things like safety. So feeling safe to take part, whether that's actually the perceived safety and feeling in a safe place at the session, or actually feeling safe in getting to a session. But there's a whole thing around kind of being safe and feeling safe or not as a barrier. I guess the other things that have come out time and time again as well are around friendships and not having anything and not having anybody to go with, or peer pressure to not take part because my friends aren't doing it, so I'm not doing it, I'm doing something else instead. So it's a whole friendship thing at play here with girls. And then the subject of kind of clothing and kit and equipment and fears about not having the right kit and equipment, are how they feel in terms of certain clothing and, you know, wearing certain items of clothing. So I guess that's just bringing the two things together. There's a whole load of reasons why girls and young women don't, or feel like they can't take part in sport and physical activity. I guess probably one of the things to highlight is around psychological barriers. So I think all of these barriers, they kind of span psychological, social and physical. But what has come out through all of the research is that a higher proportion of girls cite psychological barriers as reasons why they don't, or feel like they can't take part compared to boys. So I'm just going to pause at that point. Kel, I'm handing over to you on this bit, aren't I? I've got the right part, haven't I? Brilliant. Okay, so Kel is going to talk a bit more about kind of some of the drivers and the motivations about why girls do and want to take part and what they want to see.
Yeah, fab. Do you want to stop sharing your slides, Helen? And I'll just pop mine up in a slightly different order as well. That'd be awesome. So we'll just get these up, guys, as well, and hopefully we'll just start to talk a little bit more about, I suppose, some examples and some of how we're bringing this learning together in practice, particularly in the Northwest, and how I suppose we can start to layer some of this learning up as to what it looks like for our groups. I'll just get these slides swapped for you. There we go. Can everyone see those? Just someone give us a quick thumbs up. Awesome. So I think what's really interesting is what we're sort of seeing as what girls are interested in. And I think this is quite valuable because it kind of highlights the power of where we've had international success. Never ever before have we had football come up. I don't even think we've had football come up in the selection of things that girls have said they're interested in. But I think what's really interesting is we've seen such success at the Lionesses in the last few years. It's really put like football on a platform for girls and their interest in taking part. And I think we really saw this in the 1,000 Young Voices research. So I think it's interesting to see how changing in what's going on nationally can have an impact across all of our networks. And 23% of girls are saying that that's one of the most common activities. So I think it just highlights the importance of things like the Inspiration campaign and having international, national events that we can guide our girls to, where they can go and see girls performing on a platform at the highest level, because we kind of always don't we think about what local programs we can get them to, what that might look like, but I think it really just highlights where there is a space for some of that to take place. We've had a significant number of people accessing some of the women's football events down in London and some of them that we've had access to up north. So again, when we're looking at that varied and vibrant offer, which we talk about as the fundamentals of doorstep sport, that still plays a really important role for inspiring our young people. And I think, as you can see across all of these kind of common activities, there's a real mix. There's a real mix of individual activities, team-based sports, things that people can do on their own, that they don't need facilities for, that they do need facilities and equipment for. So I think it just highlights, again, the mix of activities that our girls can find valuable. And I'll talk about a little bit of an example in the Northwest and one of the events that we ran, just to give you a bit of an example of that. So we're talking again about some of the most popular types of activities that girls would like to try. So again, this just highlights that kind of real mix, you know, across all of those themes. And I think just that first and top point's really important. It's just activities involving music. So again, when Helen was talking about like the psychological barriers, when you involve music in an activity, it produces a feeling within the body. So we're thinking about what environment we're creating that helps our women and girls to feel safe, to feel grounded, to feel balanced. And it's those elements of things like music and the wraparound activity that often can act as stepping stones into that space feeling like a space where they want to be. So I'll give you, like I say, I'll give you a bit of an example of that as we move on shortly. And again, you know, just highlighting that these top three things are some of the things that have come out all the way through the research, even through when it first started back, you know, in the 2000 and you know, like the mid 2013 sort of thing. You know, that fun, friendship, fitness, you know, still comes out really high in those top four. And I think we've really started to see a focus on improved mental health from the pandemic. But I think if you've seen the original research, it still said things around self-esteem, confidence, how girls felt about themselves, you know, is right up there. I just think they have more of a language now to kind of, I suppose, talk about how they feel more so. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an example here, because these are three of the things that came out the original research about how we design and develop our programs for women and girls that remain really important. And I'll give you an example first, and then I'll move on to some of the event-based stuff that we've been doing in the Northwest. So we did a yoga and mindfulness pilot. So as we were coming into and out of the first pandemic, we had some Sport England funding that allowed us to test and learn whether that as an activity could be something that we could develop, that our girls and women would want to engage with. So really understanding who our target audience is really important. We really wanted to target women and girls based on all this research that we'd had, and research around Club One, around individual activities being something that was more attractive for our women and girls, and how we kind of pulled that programme together around what's called pre-engagement. So we designed a programme of 8 weeks. There was only 6 weeks of delivery in that. The first week was literally a getting to know you activity. It was like, let's explore yoga, let's explore any misconceptions. We might get anything out of our system that we think it is or it isn't. You got to meet the deliverer. You got to find out a little bit about what you'd need, what kit you'd need, what the session was going to look like, what the space was going to be, who was going to be involved. And that's what we would call all of that pre-engagement. So what work can we do with girls before they actually even are active that helps them to feel safe? So to help them, that creates that that safe environment, that helps them to feel a bit more connected with the deliverer or the practitioner, if it's somebody different from normal. And it really just sets aside that time to really kind of build that relationship and support and rapport, again, so that we're helping our young people to feel like this is a session for them. And then all the way through that yoga and mindfulness work that we did, we got feedback from the girls. You know, did they like it? What else did they want to have in? What would also be valuable? We kind of got them to think about how it could be used in everyday life. So when Karen talked about doorstep sport plus empowerment last week, you know, we're starting to think about life skills and how some of these activities can be taken away and used in the wider world. And a really good example of this was we did like a centering activity at the start of each of those yoga sessions. And one of the girls, when we delivered a session in Stockport in May, actually said she sat down at her exam table when she was about to do one of her GCSE exams and actually sat and grounded herself because she was really anxious. She'd gone in feeling really uncomfortable. She was overwhelmed. And getting our youngsters to think about in those sessions how they could use it outside was a big part of that. Another example of that is one of the groups in Stockport actually told us that they wanted to do a bit of a youth work session after. So they did an hour of the women and girls work delivering yoga, and then they did an hour of youth work where they had some food, they chatted a bit about a topic that they'd covered, you know, like something like self-awareness or overwhelm, and then they got to talk it out in that session afterwards while they had a bit of food together. So it was like an informal add-on. You know, again, when we're thinking about that varied and vibrant offer, it's like what else additions can we bring on that those women and girls want? And we wouldn't have necessarily thought about that unless we were asking them, you know, what's going to work for them, you know, like how can their voice be heard and how can we use this to shape what's taking place. And then that really kind of builds on that third point there about the approach to the activities and sessions and creating the right offer. And that right offer, as we've talked about with Doorstep Sport, is what's right for that group, and what's right for one group might not be right for another. So that's why it's really important to continue to ask and to continue to build what is right for the individual group you're working with. And to give you a little bit more of an example with that, I suppose, we've started to look at how this research builds on what we already know about Doorstep Sport. So there's a really great infographic that's been put together based on the work in 2023 in Wales around those Doorstep Sport ingredients that we know are really foundational. So our 5 rights, including our right staff, and then some of those things around lifelong participation, personal development opportunities, and that attractive offer. So that resource down the bottom of the screen there we'll share with you, because that's got some really great examples of that in practice. And I'm just going to share a few that we've done in the Northwest. So over the last 2 years, we've been looking at how we can use these insights through a partnership approach with Greater Manchester Moving, so our active partnership in Manchester. They had a real thematic focus on women and girls. The Northwest regional team, a place team, have had a real focus on women and girls. So we wanted to, if we could use our insights with a bit of their funding, what could we do over a longer period of time that could build up these principles and pass some of them on to some of our projects? So throughout this period, there's been some peer research taking place where a group in Leathersham have done some peer research around the barriers to engage in with things like leisure centres, places where they can access sport. They've then fed back to us that they'd really like to take part in a multi-sport activity event that they could do that's just for women and girls. So last August, we put on a women and girls event, and what was really interesting is it really brought together all of these aspects. So in the morning, we had multi-sport activities going on. We had things like we had some dance activities going on. We had some yoga and mindfulness. We had upstairs, we had some tennis. We had some badminton. We also had things like rugby. So we had a women's rugby team. 4 girls came along, and actually they were probably only 18, 19, 20 themselves, delivered rugby to our girls. And what was interesting, it was actually one of the most enjoyed activities in the feedback. So that was something that we'd have never thought actually rugby would have been something they really enjoyed. But I think it kind of just highlights that even though if you can set the right environment, those competitive team-based sport activities that maybe are seen as more attractive to boys because of some of those things like the physical aspects, they can actually work for girls. But what they fed back to us in the feedback was that they loved the fact that it was 4 girls that were a similar age to them. They had a real buzz about them. They were really light-hearted. They got involved. They played, you know, so it was the style of delivery that really made that activity work. We also had things over lunch like that kind of made it a really nice wraparound offer. There was a talk with those 4 those 4 athletes, those rugby athletes. So they got to kind of pick brains, they got to ask questions, got to find out a little bit more about them. We also had a photo booth. We had a DJ that was being DJ'd by a young female volunteer of Jane Nolan's, who was part of one of our projects in Liverpool. She came over with her DJing decks and really set the vibe for the event, which was it was brilliant in the end. You know, it really kind of set that feel. We had a photo booth. We had some jewellery making going on. So Helen talked about some of those. What did you call it, Helen? I've never come across that as the programme, so it's interesting that learning is coming through. Was it like
Was that the Girls Alive one?
Yeah, absolutely, that's it. And
that was
Jane
that was
Nolan.
exactly that. That
Yeah.
was just the interactive magazine. All the things you
Yeah.
described about that event was made up. The kind of the sessions around that. It was everything with some sport in it, but not just about sport.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and we kind of gave them the chance to kind of get involved with a little bit of a different thing, and then they kind of got to pick. And the interesting thing as well, because I think it really emphasises that you just talked about there, Helen, is that the afternoon session was different again. So we had someone in from one of the mental health teams doing a really light touch session on mental health and things to look out for, and some little signposting. We had a self-defense session going on, and we had just the opportunity to kind of just sit and make some of that jewelry and chat and catch up. So that fun friendship aspect to that was like really integral, and they got the opportunity, really, that choice was in there, that they got to pick that afternoon session which they wanted to go to most, and we just put a couple of them on repeat so that they could pick a couple. What was also really interesting as well is the last thing that we did at the end of the day was this. It was something called the Shoopery that we found on LinkedIn. And this was a lady that did, I had to write it down, it just made me laugh too much. It was like silent disco, and it was about letting go. So it was about this, it was about the fact that, you know, like lots of people want to get up and have a dance. And you probably had this when you've been out on a Friday, Saturday night, you know, you've wanted to get up on that dance floor, but it's that feeling of kind of wanting to do it but not wanting to do it. And actually, if you get up and do something that you're a little bit scared to do it, and that letting go is part of almost just stepping outside that comfort zone. And what we had in the end was like a dancing Congo going around with like 2 different types of music. So there was like a dance vibe and there was like an 80s vibe. You could kind of pick which one you want. They had these interactive headphones going on, and the staff were up, the young people were up. It was, you know, like that real sort of vibe of everyone's participating. So I just think it's really valuable when we're starting to look at that attractive offer. Some of the mix of that approach is really valuable. What we also found as well is that after that event, the girls that were at that event that came from Rochdale said, we want to deliver something like this. So as part of some funding that we had in link to Greater Manchester Moving and the AP, and linked to some of the women and girls work, we were able to sort of match fund them with an event that then actually some of those girls, linked with some of the apprentices they've got in Rochdale, they created a similar event. So there's a real sort of theme of like role modelling what we want to see, or what the evidence is telling us, and what girls are then feeding in. So then other people being able to pick up some of this methodology and these principles, and being able to then start to deliver more based on who they've got and what they want, and what can be fed into based on their insight in their areas. And that's kind of built on. So you start to look at how we can think about lifelong participation and things like year-round opportunities, because are there more things that we can then go, okay, well, this is coming up next. After that event, we also had an Engaging Women and Girls workshop. So we had 4 of those apprentices from Rochdale come and attend that workshop. So again, when we're looking at personal development opportunities, we're continuing to layer up what's next. You know, what else can they come to that's going to have that same feel? And then how can that be used and embedded within their local areas? So just a little bit of an example there, really, I suppose, that starts to look at how we put these things into practice and how we can layer up some of this insight that we have over the years, and why it's so important to continue to hear about the insights that we've learned about. And like Helen said, I'd not heard about those programmes. as in like I've not heard I've not seen the branding, I've not necessarily seen them in that sense, but Jane Nolan, some of our place-based leads, our tutors that have been long-term, have shared a lot of that practice as well. So this kind of sharing of our knowledge and insight and learning and taking the pathway forward is really valuable. I'm only going to touch on this for a moment because I'm just going to share it with you because it's a really valuable piece of research, and there's a couple of good videos in here as well. So we'll send the link to this. But it just really highlights, again, something that keeps coming up throughout all of the insight is the impact of puberty and that time period on girls. And I think it really highlights why girls keep highlighting it's about how they feel. And sometimes it's about the safe spaces that we create, but actually sometimes it's about that psychological safety, how they start to feel around boys and other people and judgment during those, that key time when puberty starts. And that research goes into some of that learning. It's really valuable. So it's just a case of, if you want to have a look at it, take a look at it, have a look at the video. It's again a resource that you can share with a network that really allows them to just get a bit of a feel for perhaps how some of our girls are feeling during that time and the impact it can have.
Cal, just before you go off that one, it's probably worth mentioning that we sit on the, what is it called now, Female Puberty and Sport and Physical Activity Roundtable group. So that's basically been convened by Women in Sport. We're on there, a number of national governing bodies, Youth Sport Trust, basically within the sector, a whole load of organisations that have identified puberty and teenage girls and the impacts it can have on sport and physical activity, and that collectively, what can we do about it? So that group was convened probably about 12 months ago, recognising that we're probably doing a bit, Women in Sport are doing a bit, Youth Sport Trust are doing a bit. Actually, let's come together and pull in all the things that we're doing in terms of resources, tools, but then also let's advocate together about why this is such an issue. So it's things like, I was at the last one last week and we were talking about just education and how this topic it's been a little bit taboo. And one of the things that's come out from girls in the past is just having a safe space to talk about it and feeling like they can talk about it, and it's something that should hide away from, right through to practical things like sanitary products and toilets, and feeling like they can speak to a trusted adult about this. And it's not just about being on your period, but also it's about the emotions and the hormones that make them, why am I feeling like this? Why do I feel like this woman? There's a whole load of complicated things happening to a girl and young woman during puberty, and that impacts on how they're feeling and what they're doing and whether they're participating and what they're not. So there was a whole conversation at the roundtable last week, is how people thinking about this and how can we support practitioners or people on the ground and equip them, so our projects, with tools and resources to help them talk about it and help them understand the complexities of it. So one of the things that we were talking about that's kind of in motion is creating just a bit of a diagnostic toolkit around what you're already doing as an organisation, but then just some really easy to use tools and resources for projects to feel like they can have those conversations with girls and practically do something about it. So I guess it's just be mindful that we're on that group, so we've got kind of a voice in the bigger sector. So it's always really good to understand if you're hearing things, seeing good practice, it's always good to kind of make sure you feed them back in. Either if there's anything that you think, we really need to be doing something about this, and it's in that space, then do feed that back.
It's almost a little bit like that elephant in the room, and again, if we can feel comfortable talking about it and have that conversation with our youngsters, you'll get that buy-in. But I think sometimes that's it, especially for LTOs as well. It's having that confidence to have that conversation, but also know it is such a significant issue. It's such a significant, there's such a significant need for that to be addressed, or it is such a barrier and it remains such a barrier. And you layer that up with impact of mental health and the pandemic in it, and you can kind of see why some of those psychological barriers have only increased, which was what we're seeing in the insight. So we'll share that with you though, just to finish as well. The last slide as well that I'm just going to touch back on, but I'm not going to show it up. It's just what Helen talked about earlier. And it's just how really that we've the pathway, or I suppose the journey that we've been on with some of this work. And even though it may have been originally a funded programme, which is where so many of the insights came from, there's been lots of spaces where further work has been funded. I think Rhiannon's put in a couple of examples from Wales in there, you know, like there's been some of the work in 2023, you know, linked to peer research. There's some continued work going on. There's, like we said, there's pockets in other areas of the country. And I think sometimes it's knowing where some of those are taking place, where some of this can be a start point for some of the work, but also picking up those conversations with some of the other place teams, you know, just to get a bit of an idea of how have you made that work, where have you got that funding from, how have things been delivered, what can we do differently, would this work? And always remembering that, you know, the power of our young people's voices and shaping some of that stuff really can't go unnoticed, because I think sometimes they'll make a suggestion to us and we'll go, God, we'd have never done that. And then we do it and we're like, oh, well, that went down well. I think that was like the photo booth that we did in Rochdale. People were absolutely loving it. We weren't even taking photos. It was just people taking photos on their camera and people getting dressed up and all sorts. So sometimes it's that confidence just to try something, and often it probably has been done at some point in the past. So as with all of these insight dissemination sessions as well, the last slide that we've got for you to share or use just gives you a bit of an example of actually some of the places where this can be used or the next steps that can be taken. So I'll just flash that up for a moment. So there's the opportunity to build on some of the existing insights that have been shared. So I know we've got a couple of the Birmingham team now that have also seen the one that we delivered yesterday around understanding young people, that is next. That's on the list for us to share more broadly. It's reflecting back of how this builds on the doorstep sport work that we delivered last week. And those sort of core 5 rights, where you might use it. You know, so have you thought about where you might start to put this into practice, where you might want to redeliver elements of it, where you think it might be useful across some of the work that you're doing? And then it's just starting to think about what else can be accessed by the network. So there is at times the opportunity for workshops around women and girls to be put on through the core offer. So that can be fed back through Mark's team or through Helen. Work can be written into bids, and projects can access that training locally. Or it might be funded through wider stakeholders or programmes like we had with Greater Manchester Move In. Ours was funded in collaboration with Opening Schools Facilities, so we were able to open that workshop up and offer it locally. So just to give you a little bit of a feel for some of the things that you can do as a what next. And I suppose just an opportunity just to take some reflections, just for, I think, 30 seconds. Given that we've shared quite a lot of stuff there, I just want you to reflect and pop in the group chat what's resonated with you. So I think we'll go with that first. So just 30 seconds, have a think about anything that stood out, anything that's resonated, anything that you'd like to use, anything you didn't expect to see. Just take a couple of moments just for a little bit of reflection. Not waiting for fastest finger first. I can see Ben, you were straight in there typing. Yeah, absolutely, Kim. So aspects of the data. We'll definitely share as well the full pieces of insight research so you can have a look. Yeah, absolutely, Rhiannon, as well. And it's, I think sometimes as well, it's that's taking stock as well, just to have a look at it. And you know, we can use it, we can reinforce our work, and it kind of just really highlights the power really of what our young people are saying. We're elevating their voices through that work. Yeah, absolutely, Ben. And the thing is as well, Ben, you know what, that DJ knew exactly what to play. Like, let's face it, we wouldn't have. Can you imagine what would be on our Spotify list compared to what our youngster played? Yeah, absolutely, Jane. It is the different sections, you know, different places, different age groups as well. And I suppose the last question as well, just to get you reflecting and thinking of, is how might you use this in practice? So thinking about moving forward, you know, where do you think this is going to be valuable for some of your work? Do you see this in a particular space, or is this more about, I suppose, you know, you're increasing your insight, knowledge, confidence?
That's what I'm thinking. Is so the how-to guides that we flashed up, that I guess all the insight was used to create then, which was then used to create the workshop. I guess they are old, but actually in terms of the content in them, like a lot of it still remains. So like there's about 12 of them. But if you're thinking about, oh gosh, that whole style, for example, and the things about including music and food and how to make it sociable and all of that, there's a how-to guide that just talks about right style and what right style could look like for a girl. Or if there's one about the right coach or leader, there's one specifically about being the right coach or leader and some of the attributes. So they're quite easy to navigate. So it's definitely worth just having a look at the series, and if you think, oh gosh, I want to know more about that bit, it's like easily digestible without wading through a load of reports. There's one particularly specifically around body image, for example, and practical things that coaches, leaders, program designers can do to be thinking more about body image. There's some real practical stuff in there. So I would say if you are, taking and doing some of this with your network, just have a quick look at those, because they'll give you some real good hints and tips. I think each one of them actually ends with hints and tips, like top 10 tips or something like that. So there's, even though they are quite old, they're still a really useful resource. You combine that with some of the stats from the 1,000 Young Voices, and there's a lot. I mean, we could have done this probably for a good half a day.
Paul, you've hit the nail on the head in your comment about, and this is one of the things that came out of the original research, is that LTOs need hand-holding. And that was exactly the phraseology that came out, and it's about helping them to do it in practice, so where we can do with them, like some of the stuff we done up in the Northwest, our projects came along with us for that event. They got to see it in practice. They got to get a feel for what it was like, about what was possible. So you've hit the nail on the head there, with the role we can play with them and how we can actively do that as place-based teams. Like, can we get that funding? Can we work with them? Like, can we get a group of youngsters? Can we help them to shape what something could look like in practice? So yeah, that's really important. It's that confidence, isn't it? So much of it's, they might know it, but it's the, how do we make it happen? Or the confidence to put some of these things into practice. So some really valuable bits of feedback in the chat as well. I just encourage people just have to a quick nosy at that before you finish, or have a look at the chat just after you finish as well, because there's some really valuable things that people are kind of picking up or wanting to do with, or considerations. I think Helen and I and others probably could talk about this for a long time. So if it's a value, definitely come back to us, ask questions, and hopefully it's been valuable. There are lots of other bits, like Helen said, to have a look at in and around these insights. We've literally kind of just touched the surface. And hopefully we'll see you on another one of these insight dissemination sessions in the summer or over in the future as well. So thanks so much for coming. Conscious people will have 3 o'clock, so if you've not, go and get yourselves a drink, have a bit of a break. But I'll be hanging around for sort of a couple of minutes if anyone wants to chat. I know, Helen, you've got to get off. So
brilliant. Thanks, guys. And I know there's a couple of questions in the chat, so we'll pick those up afterwards. But thank you for coming. Hope you've learned something.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, guys.